Well, as Kathy shared that, I want you to understand the idea of offense is that it happens to all of us. It happens to all of us. It doesn't matter how spiritual you are, or how unspiritual you are, or what you deal with in life. We're all offended. We live in a sinful world. We get bombarded by people and choices and decisions that people do. But what happens during the offense is how we start to gauge where you're at spiritually. Because there's really two ways you can go when it comes down to it. When you're offended and this offense comes and it hurts and it breaks the core of who you are, you can either choose to deal with it and say, I'm going to go before the throne and I'm going to work through this. I'm going to wrestle through this with God to get to the other side. Or I'm going to bypass God and I'm going to wrestle with it and I'm going to hurt someone else or I'm going to hurt myself in the process. That's how you deal with offense. It's one way or the other. See, what about when we're dealing with those offenses and it's mistreatment? I mean, it's clearly, it is not your fault. You haven't done anything wrong, or maybe you did a little bit or whatever, but you're just truly like, man, I don't deserve this at all. Why in the world? God, where are you? Why is this happening? Well, give me a little freedom here in Romans. The Apostle Paul, kind of paraphrase of that is that everything that comes into our lives, whether good or evil, first passes through the hands of a sovereign, loving God before it got to us. And he uses it for our good. So what does that mean? That means when things are coming down and tough things are happening in our life, man, God doesn't say, whoa, I didn't see that one happening. Oh, man, I don't know what we're going to do now. No, as all these pieces pass through, even those hard things of life, God looks at it and says, okay, yep, I'm going to allow that to take place. You know what? I'm going to allow this situation. Oh, I'm going to allow that hurtful thing to be said. I'm going to allow that hurtful thing to be done. And guess what? We're going to use that for the glory. We're going to use even these bad things to point to his goodness. A lot of times we spend so much time saying, why? Most important thing that you can ask yourself is what? What happened, and God, what do you want me to do about it? What happened, and God, what do you want me to do about it? See, we're all going to be offended. Sometimes we're offended and we start to judge people. Like, have you ever been like, oh, I know what that person was thinking. I know what they said. Oh, I saw when they came in and they purposely ignored me. And they were thinking this and they were, wait a second, what are we doing? We're judging people's motives. We don't have the right to judge anyone's motives. We don't know. Who knows motives? God knows motives. And so it's so important that we realize as we're looking at things of life, we can't judge other people, their motives. We don't know what's going on in their heart. We don't know what they're thinking. But what about when those actions come? I mean, those big time actions come. When your spouse does something, it doesn't just hit that bump on the road. I mean, it goes right head on into you. When they do an offense that's so big, what do you do? What about your spouse? And you're like, honey, I didn't ask for it. What do you do? What do you do with your kids that you've already spent nights staying up, loving, caring, sacrificing, giving everything you can to them, and then you find out that they're betraying you and they're hurting you and they're acting out? How do you deal with the offense? How do you find freedom? How do you find wholeness? It's in forgiveness, and as Kathy shares, that's the one way that we can find oneness in what God's doing.